A very warm welcome to our audience here and online. And again, welcome UKRI senior team to Norwich. Bit of housekeeping before we go much further. So the toilets are at the back of the room. There's no fire alarm expected. There's a muster point outside of the fire doors, out this way, into the car park and on the right. You can obviously go out the doors you came in or follow through this way if you hear the alarm. The next message is to keep and reuse your cups for tea and coffee. Okay, so that's a good plan. And then in terms of photography, Adam is taking photographs. There are signs to say if you don't want to be in a photograph, please mention that to Adam. So hopefully, please do that if you haven't done so far. And then finally, if you're talking about this and on social media, which we hope you will, talk about being here and the conversations you're having, you can use the hashtag UKRI Connect will work, and we can bring everything together. So I'm Roz Bird. I'm the Chief Exec of Anglia Innovation Partnership. We're the science park management company for Norwich Research Park. And I have to say, I need to say that I bring potentially a private sector perspective to the park and to the day's discussions. My background is as a surveyor and a science park manager, a developer, getting planning consent and managing and running and developing science parks in the UK. So this is the midway point of the UKRI two-day programme. It's connecting all of us as cross-sector stakeholders in Norwich, Norfolk and the east of England. Your presence and participation, from the conversations we've had with UKRI so far, they're saying it fuels their energy and their enthusiasm as a UKRI team when they go back to the office. And so that's really important, actually, for us to know that, because they've got real ambition for change and for success, and that will benefit all of us. So let's keep them motivated and enthusiastic. They go into the office next Monday. So I have read the strategy, and I genuinely think that it is an inspiring read. And I have read a number of government documents in the past, and we all know that they're not all like that. But the reason it is because it is ambitious. But I do think it's also really honest about the actions that we need to take to achieve this science superpower status in the UK. It talks about what's needed, which is cultural change at the heart of academia to become more diverse, connected, resilient, engaged and inclusive. And that will drive the economic, social, environmental and cultural benefits that we're all looking for. So on day one, yesterday, the UKRI team visited Scotto Enterprise Park, the Norwich University of the Arts, and then Norwich Research Park. We had some roundtable discussions, and we were able to demonstrate, I think, that we are embracing these programmes and initiatives that will bring about change, away from individuals being stuck in narrow academic routes, and instead, throughout their careers, be able to move from academia to industry and back again with ease. We're not there yet, but we were talking about the programmes on that journey. And one of the most successful UKRI programmes embraced by Norwich Research Park and mentioned a lot yesterday was PIPS, which is professional internships for PhD students, which Ottoline invented. So if later you're stuck for a question, we can ask her about that. So we have people working at the Sainsbury Laboratory from Norwich City College doing T-levels, and we've got growing recognition of the work of technicians on the campus. In the Levelling Up Roundtable, there were a wide range of examples of the need to break down barriers and create new models of working with community. UKRI's ambition is to reposition where research and innovation sits in the UK. It should be retained by everyone, not the preserve of a small group of academics. Ottoline was talking about the human instinct to explore that we have as children, and why we can't retain that as we go through life. And really that the science and innovation that we're working on should be by everyone and for everyone. So you might say radical stuff, or maybe it is just being honest about what is needed to maximise the impact of research and innovation. So that was a brief look at day one. This is day two, and it's about you, me, all of us learning more about what we can do and considering together how we can play our part to ensure that Norwich, Norfolk, the east of England is absolutely integral to the success of research and innovation in the UK to benefit all. So I'd like to now invite Professor Dame Ottoline Leyser, CEO of UKRI, to the platform for her keynote presentation about progress against the UKRI strategy, Transforming Tomorrow Together. And as well as being the CEO of UKRI, Ottoline is Regius Professor of Botany at the University of Cambridge, and prior to this was Director of the Sainsbury Laboratory at the University of Cambridge. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much for the very kind and insightful introduction. And yeah, it is true that it is great for all of us from UKRI to get out and be with the people who are really driving forward the agenda that we all know is so important for the UK. And that's absolutely resonates across everything that we've seen on this visit so far. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion with you about how we can take that all further. It is, I think, let's see, this perhaps, exciting and critical time for research and innovation in the UK. From a kind of UKRI perspective, I think UKRI is a unique selling point for the UK. We have brought together the 9 councils covering all disciplines and all sectors, so universities in the form of Research England, working with their colleagues in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, Innovate UK, the UK's innovation agency, and then the 7 disciplinary research councils covering all disciplines, and of course also deep engagements with both universities and the private sector and the third sector. So we're part of that deep system across the UK, academia, business, third sector, public sector, and of course international partners. And because we bring together all of those things in one organisation now, we can act as a key node in the system, a smart connector. And that gives us the opportunity, I think, to do research and innovation better as a country. And this is critical, partly to build that national shared endeavour, that consensus where everybody feels that we have tools to tackle the incredible challenges that we face and that they can play a part, they can be part of that. That's a core part, I think, of our ability to move forward as a nation. And partly because we are a small country, and that actually is a benefit. We can build that much better connected system more easily than some of our larger competitors. And those larger competitors will always have far more money than we do, US, China, those kinds of places. We cannot invest at that kind of scale. So that means every pound we invest has to be doing many things and has to be driving that join up in as much as it is funding individual parts. And I think we can do that. I think that's an opportunity that we have as a country because we're small, we're excellent across the board, and we have institutions like UKRI, but also now a whole new department in government, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, that has an explicit cross-government remit for research and innovation, which is actually quite a revolutionary thing to happen in government. To have a department that has a cross Whitefall remit in joining up and delivering the full set of integrated activities that you need to make the economy work as an innovation-led economy. And that is encapsulated in the Science and Technology Framework, which is kind of the manifesto for DSIT. And I would encourage people to go away and read it if you have time, because the framework itself, I think, absolutely sets out the 10 different levers that you have to consider, that you have to pull in an aligned way in order to drive forward this agenda. There are specific actions that are the early actions under each of those 10 things in the document, which is great, but actually, to my mind, it's the framework itself that's critical, and that will be the case always. Always, those 10 things we will need to have front and centre and be doing in a joined-up way in order to take this whole thing forward. So I have a sort of a cartoon version of the Science and Technology Framework, which I think is really helpful in how we think about ourselves as a research and innovation community and the opportunity that we have and the challenges that we face. So I think we can think about our economy really, and our society in the context of 3 corners of a triangle. There are the high productivity, innovative, high growth businesses with the really high quality jobs. There's high quality, high productivity, innovative public services, and it's only through getting innovation into our public services that they will become sustainably affordable. And so all of those public services, and together those 2 things contribute to supporting and building highly skilled, healthy, thriving, prosperous people. And these 3 things are obviously deeply interconnected. You obviously need the highly skilled people to deliver work in and fill the fantastic jobs in the high productivity businesses, and similarly in the public services, but also, of course, the skills and the health and the prosperity of the people depend on the high quality public services, and of course the jobs provided, but also the services and value add provided by the businesses. And then the final connection obviously goes through the jobs and the businesses to supporting the public services through tax. And this triangle then has the potential to drive in a positive feedback, increasing in a good way all of these things and building the kind of prospering society, prospering inclusive society that we want to see. But also there is a serious danger of it driving in the opposite direction down into a debt trap, where more tax is taken out of both people's pockets and those high productivity businesses to support the public services than actually allows those businesses to thrive. And that debt trap, I think, is a real risk. And where our economy is at the moment, I think, is quite on the brink of being dragged into that kind of cycle, which we have to avoid. And there are ways to do that, and that comes from thinking about those that tax spend in more innovative ways, one of which is one of the key pillars of the Science and Technology Framework, public procurement, where we spend the tax to procure things for the public services, which of course we need, but we do that in a way that actually supports the activity of our businesses by procuring from them the products and services that they're delivering. And then from our point of view and the point of view of everybody in this room, the other key way that you can invest tax sensibly to drive the positive feedback in this circle is through investing in research and innovation. And funding that goes through R&D investment does multiple things all at once. It provides the ideas, the raw material for both the innovation in business but also in the public services. Those discoveries and new ways of thinking about things and new ways of doing things. And at the same time, it supports people in our universities, our institutes, for example, to develop those ideas, but that drives up skills in and of itself. And so those highly skilled people are then crucial to continuing to drive this cycle round in a positive direction. So I think our job as a research and innovation community is to think how we should work together to ensure that this cycle moves in the right direction. That's how we get that inclusive shared vision for how we can rebuild our country in a way that works for everybody. That's, as Roz was saying, how we create a research and innovation system that is truly by everyone and for everyone, and therefore raises the opportunities and the outcomes for people right across the country. So we need some other things. These are the other elements of the framework that I haven't mentioned, the right infrastructure, regulation and standards, and so on. It's a very high quality document, in my view, that really thinks hard about how we can wire up our system to work for the UK. Everybody working in the system has a place in this. It's not a threat to anybody. On the contrary, if we work together, everybody will benefit. And this maps directly onto the way we think about our strategy, which we've already heard about. So our strategy, which is now deep into the implementation phase, and I'm really keen to hear from people how that's working for you on the ground. Our strategy is built around 6 pillars. There are people and careers, places and infrastructures, ideas of all kinds, innovation, and of course the impacts to tackle key challenges like net zero that arise from that. And all of that, of course, needs us to work but better as an organisation to make sure all of those things are delivered. And as we heard earlier, to the principles for change underpinning all of the things that we're doing are to consider, in the context of all of those things, the full diversity of things that we need. Have we got the right portfolio of people, of ideas, of infrastructures? Are they properly joined up so that we actually get the benefits of that diversity? Are we building sufficient resilience in the system to deal with new opportunities and risks? And of course, is all of this deeply engaged with communities across the country, and therefore indeed reflecting of the things that people need and want where they are? So we are, as I say, deep into implementation, and our opportunity as an organisation is to build that balanced portfolio of investments across all of those activities with aligned incentives to drive the kind of changes that we think we need, those kind of diversity with connectivity and resilience with engagement. So this slide just has a few key examples of the kinds of things that we're doing, thinking in a much more integrated way about how we support PhD students through the New Deal, rolling out a different CV that recognises a much wider range of activities than just papers and previous grants, so that people can move across the sector easily, because you can compare people with very different career pathways because they're able to set out their contributions to knowledge, to supporting people, to the wider research and innovation system and to wider communities. They can set those out in a standard format that allows you to compare people who are very different, because they will all have made contributions in diverse ways across those 4 categories in the pathway. I don't have time to go through all of these things, but I hope what you can see is that portfolio approach where there are investments aligned with different ways of working and thinking about things that are allowing us to build the kind of research and innovation system that we need. I'm running out of time, so I shall simply move on. You can cut this portfolio in a variety of ways. We invest, as I say, across all of those components. I will highlight in the context of this region, we have nearly 1,500 projects currently led by award holders in the east of England, £1.2 billion. A critical investment we're now putting into this region is the new build, next generation infrastructure programme for the John Innes Centre and the Sainsbury Laboratory, which will be an investment of £317.7 million over the next 7 years, really to transform the infrastructure for plant science on the Norwich Research Park. And the critical rationale that underpins that is to build a national centre that serves the whole of the UK, as well as, of course, being embedded in the extraordinary research and innovation ecosystem that you have here in Norwich that we've been enjoying and being inspired by over the last couple of days. And that's a key element to this. As I say, £1 has to do many things. It needs to invest in the NRP, but it also needs to invest in the UK and indeed globally, where many of the challenges that we're tackling are obviously international and need that international approach. So I will stop there, and I hope that I've illustrated the kind of way we're thinking about this. And I'll be joined on stage by my executive chair colleagues from BBSRC and ESRC, and we're really keen to hear how it feels for you, what more we could be doing, and how we could be working differently to support the extraordinary work that you're all doing. Thank you.
So joining Ottoline on the stage is Stian Westlake, Executive Chair of the Economic and Social Research Council. Prior to this, Stian was the Chief Exec of the Royal Statistical Society. He's also co-author of Restarting the Future, How to Fix the Intangible Economy and Capitalism Without Capital. And Professor Guy Poppy, Interim Executive Chair of the Biotechnology and Biological Science Research Council. And prior to this, Guy served as the Food Standards Agency inaugural Chief Scientific Advisor and has published extensively on food systems and food security. So this panel session, we're talking about the role of UKRI as a flexible and innovative funder. And the idea for this session is to get as much chance to hear from all of you as we can in that time. And don't forget, you'll need to be inspiring, and give them some enthusiasm for Monday morning. So I'm happy to start, with a question or two. But I do know in the time we've got in the audience, we've got some great people that we could start to single out. So I don't know if anybody would like to start with a comment or a question. Straight away, that's great.
Can you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah,
so I'm
thank you.
Head of Commercialisation at the University of Cambridge Technology Transfer Company, Cambridge Enterprise. And I think this is exciting. But I think one of the things that I observe is that we do a lot of this at a world-class standard. That doesn't mean we should do a lot better, but we still struggle to get a lot of the great innovation outputs of this sticking here and helping our economy here. So I'd be really interested to hear on your reflections about how you integrate as much as you can, being a government body versus the private sort of financing sector, how you're integrating with the sort of financing activities so we can keep jobs and things located in this country, because ultimately the innovation jobs are few and far between. Even if we do this well, it will be the sort of the jobs which are maybe less glamorous and more mundane, but really keep people's mortgages paid in maybe the less fortunate part of the country to places like Cambridge. I'd love to understand your perspective on that. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'm sure Stian will want to come in a minute. So it's a critical point. We have this fantastic research base, brilliant, absolutely central part of the system. We're actually pretty good at spin-outs and startups, terrific, wonderful companies. The bit where we seem to have more of a challenge is scale-up. So those companies scaling up and staying in the UK rather than being bought out by overseas investors. And I'm particularly interested in how we anchor more of the high-value manufacturing that emerges from some of these exciting startups and spin-outs in the UK. Even if they stay here with their headquarters, quite often they're offshoring the manufacturing, and quite often, in terms of value into our economy, much of that comes out of the manufacturing. I don't think we're ever going to be. I personally don't think it's a sensible strategy for the UK to invest in high-volume, low-value manufacturing. I think we should focus on the relatively low-volume, high-value manufacturing. Lots of exciting opportunities in the new kind of cell and gene therapies, for example, RNA based medicines that we all know about from the vaccine programs, those kinds of things. But also, more broadly, in photonics and quantum, quite a lot of quite exciting high-value manufacturing opportunities, I think. And so how do we do that? So absolutely, UKRI has a role to play in the way it supports startups to think about that longer-term trajectory. So things like the Innovate UK Edge programme. So helping our founders as best we can to think about what they're going to do next, and not to think that, I mean, to encourage people not just to think they're going to sell out at some early stage. That's one thing. There is an interesting discussion about whether our full set of funding across that early stage is balanced correctly. Are people spinning out a little bit too soon so that they can access funding sources that are available to companies that are not available, for example, in a institute or an academic base that is working up an idea? Is there enough proof of concept funding? That's another thing that is often discussed. But then more broadly, how we can support the patient capital community to build up confidence for those investors to put money into scale up is a very interesting question. That's another key element that I think often is flagged as not working as well in the UK as it could be. I have a personal priority, because I think almost all of those problems would be reduced, solved, helped if we had much greater career path diversity in our research and innovation system. If it wasn't academics working in academia, finance people working in finance, and founders trying to found companies. If we had much more churn of people across those communities, including the policy community, or our tax incentives, right, all of those kinds of things. So I have that as a top priority. It's not a quick fix, but I think it would fix a very large number of things that are wrong with our system, and that key problem being one of them.
I mean, just to build on that, I think I couldn't agree more with the importance of all the various incentives, and we know that things like providing access to risk capital and growth capital, there are important roles for public programmes in making that happen. But I think Ottoline's absolutely right to finish on this point about the importance of people in all of this. And one of the things I found so inspiring about our visit to Norwich Science Park yesterday and some of the conversations was meeting the relatively early career researchers in many cases who, because they've been on PhD programs that had included the opportunity to go into industry or to undertake impact acceleration account projects that have given them the opportunity to work with businesses, that they had had a bit more of that mindset, a bit more of a mindset that says there is a world outside academia, or equally for people in business to realise that academia has a wealth of insights it can offer for productive and high growth firms. And I think a really important role that UKRI is playing, whether it's through the design of PhD funding, whether it's opportunities further on, whether it's things like impact acceleration accounts, is to try and create an environment where our people more and more have one foot in both of those camps, so they're more willing to take up these opportunities when they come about.
Guy, did you want to come in?
Just very briefly, I think the other thing which is hopefully beginning to be well illustrated is the fact that, as Ottoline described, the coming together of different disciplinary councils with Research England and Innovate UK means that the communities at different stages in the evolution of doing that well can talk to one another and learn from each other. I mean, BBSRC has a series of innovation campuses based around a lot of the supported institutes who are here today. And that is a successful development. But being able to perhaps work very, very closely as part of the same organisation with Innovate UK or EPSIRC, which have done this sort of thing in their work, or talking with Stian about some of the sort of the actual policy drivers and the financial markets, means I think we can share information together and learn from each other to drive it forward in a way in which 5 or 6 years ago we were perhaps a little bit more siloed in our thinking.
And so the theme of being connected to understand the problem and the solutions is possibly what this is about. And I wondered from the Cambridge Enterprise perspective, what role we could all play to understand and potentially influence venture capitalists' exit strategies. Because really that's a big part of that's what partly influences what happens next to a company once they've gone through some good programs, they've got themselves established, they've been around for a while, they're successful. That exit is heavily influenced by the venture capital funding, is it not?
It absolutely is, and of course there's a huge number of variables there. I think it's partly to do with the way the venture investment works in this country and partly to do with the cultural outlook. And I think we've probably got to help not only change people's views about where they wish to work and how their career profile goes and that sort of stuff, but actually what their aspirations is. And I think there remains quite a prevalent aspiration, which is if I can only get £7 million in my bank account, I'm done. I think the Americans define that as less politely as, excuse me, the FU money. And I think, which means you don't have to play any further, whereas the aspiration to build something really, really big commonly is not as big here. And I'm reminded by a very good American friend of mine who was in my team now doing great stuff in Cambridge. He said, you don't have this culture of, even if you're just mowing lawns in this country, I'm going to have the best lawn mowing business in Louisiana, was his comment. And I think we need to think about that beyond all the career structures and change that aspiration about what you're doing and why you would do it.
But I suppose what I'm saying is, as well as the individual, there's the heavy influence of the funding that's there. And I think it might be another group that we ought to embrace and say,
Absolutely.
How can we influence those decisions and get them confident about continuing to invest and continuing their exit, but to continue in the UK.
And helping them believe that they can build those businesses rather than, in the pejorative term, spare parts businesses which are ingested and consumed, but actually businesses can do that kind of high value, low volume manufacturing and decide to locate it in, well, I don't care, anywhere else in the rest of the country. I think that's a really important cultural change that is. And I am British, but I think there's a very British outlook that we need to have much, much more aspiration for that. And to give you a personal perspective, I've got two good would-be godkids who want to go into this kind of thing. One's a mathematician, one's a medic. My son wants to be a biochemist and my daughter an engineer. And I have to look them in the eye. Well, maybe not. But when they look you in the eye and you think, what would I say to them? If you want aspiration, right now you have to leave the country. And I have to say that as a person. And I think that's a very telling story. And I don't want that to happen. But when I know them as people I care about individually, I think that's something we need to change.
Okay. And so can I bring Stella in? I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot. I should have said I would like to bring you in next. From the Innovate UK's perspective on all of this, with the funding at the early stages, but also the exits and what Innovate can do or wants to do to influence this growth of businesses that start here. They're high growth companies, they stay here. How do we do that from your perspective?
Thank you, Roz. So, hi, everybody. I'm Stella Peace. I work at Innovate UK. I'm the Executive Director for Healthy Living and Agriculture. And our role at Innovate UK is to inspire people to get involved in innovation. It is to involve and connect people, and it's also to drive investment. So we have a number of different products and services that help that. I think we've already mentioned Edge, for example. We're particularly active, maybe I should comment, given the exchange we had around developing with investors and working with them so that we can help to de-risk and then bring investors into that process. But I think there's a lot of work to do to continue that. You're absolutely right. So yes, I think Innovate UK are definitely on that journey. Please let us work with you on that, and increasingly as well connecting with our colleagues across the research councils.
Brilliant, thanks, sir. Does anyone else want to volunteer a question? Otherwise, I'll pick on someone. OK, that's fine. Over this side.
Hi, I'm Angela Cart from Rothamsted Research. I do get the focus on the £1 ratio. But of course, we can have an impact through many different pathways. Policy, society, translation into practice. I think what would help us is having a more clever way of turning that into pounds per value, because it's often very difficult to show that metric. And yet we do it really, really well in universities and all our institutes. Those different routes to impact, which do affect large numbers of people and the way we do things in the UK. How can we capture that? Is there some help that we could get on better, smarter economic ways of expressing that, which would add value to your £1? Often you have to go back to looking at spin-outs, indicators for industrial funding, but there could be many other ways we could capture it if we knew how to do it better.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to pass that one straight to Stian, because it's very much in his sights, I would say.
It's an absolutely vital question, and to some extent, the underpinning of everything that we do from a funding point of view, provision of public funding, depends on being able to make a really credible case to government, but also to the public, that investing in R&D effectively makes their lives better. Treasury care about money, but ultimately people care about evidence that this is making their lives better. I think there's a number of approaches, as you say. For some of the economic things, there has been, I think, a lot of hard work done over the last 20 years to develop increasingly effective ways of showing the economic returns from the public money that gets invested in R&D and the work that everyone in the R&D system does. It's been very interesting. The quality of that work from an economic point of view has improved over time. I think it's become more and more compelling for the people in central government who make these decisions. But you're absolutely right that that is a very impoverished depiction of what R&D, the benefits that research and innovation deliver. And I think that's why it's always going to be important. I think it's important to try and measure the benefits to things like health, where there is at least some basis for quantifying things. But I think there's also a really important narrative role here. You know, politicians deal in narratives because that's what voters think about. And I think it's really important that we continue to keep thinking about the stories and keep thinking about the stories from the point of view not just of ourselves as experts in our own areas of research, but from the point of view of, well, what would this mean for people? So although I'm personally an enthusiast for quantifying things, I think we need to make sure that in justifying what we do, we leave a big part for narrative. We keep on making those stories, and we tell them in as eloquent ways as we possibly can.
Guy.
Yeah, no, and just to add, I mean, I think the combination of the narrative and some quantitative metrics is very powerful. But I think there has been a lot of advance in looking at the non-monetary capital, so sort of looking at social capital and natural capital and these types of things, you know, are becoming quite important. And I think the rise of aspects around ecosystem services, where it's beginning to put a range of values on services which are provided from natural capital. I suppose when you monetize that, it can get slightly difficult. For instance, I think I saw a figure that if you can see a green field from your bedroom, it's worth £350 a year. So, I mean, you know, how that figure is derived, I don't know. But these sorts of things, you know, do enable looking at different capitals and then perhaps putting a monetary value on.
Okay, so do we have some people that want to talk about the impacts that their projects that they're involved with are having, the narrative? Have we got people that would like to mention not just the sort of economic value of their project, but the social, environmental, societal impacts? I'm going to pick on people if not. I'm going to say, yeah, Anne, okay, great, we've got some volunteers. We'll go around the room, we'll take all of those volunteers, some ideas.
So I'm Anne Osbourn from the John Innes Centre, and I just want to underline the importance of social enterprise and what that can do for community collaboration, culture. And there's a huge amount of work that goes on already that many of us are involved in. And Norwich, I think, in this region, is extremely well positioned to capitalise. It's, you know, it's well known for its science, but it's also hugely well known for its arts and humanities. And although there is collaboration between the two, Norwich could be, the region could be world leading. It could be a test base for really pushing the limits on that. And I think there is the willingness to do it, and there are lots of activities ongoing, but there needs to be a bigger vision, which is difficult, but it's, as Ottoline was saying, you know, there would be something in it for everybody, and there would be a huge amount of added value.
Brilliant. There's a guy behind, that's right.
Simon Cook, the Babram Institute. In terms of the narrative and carrying the public with you, I think it's very important that we take a more democratic approach to our public engagement activities, explaining to the public what we're doing and what we're achieving, and we're certainly doing that at Babram. A lot of our PE activities used to be based in Cambridge and at the Cambridge Science Festival. I would argue that we were preaching to the converted there. In fact, passively, we were contributing to further inequalities, really. So we've completely changed what we're doing. We're targeting all our public engagement and outreach activities to areas of lowest social mobility and highest deprivation in the east of England now. And I would argue very strongly that we're having a much larger delta in terms of reaching people and teaching them the importance of science and innovation to their ordinary lives. And I think that's something that we all need to do.
Was there someone else that had their hand up wanted to bring a project to the room? No. Did you have some questions from the back? Nick?
So it's just to pick up that point on social impact. Of course, I think UKRI captures this really well through the Research Excellence Framework. So the university sector captures its social impact extraordinarily well. I think perhaps the work that needs to be done is to try and broaden that across the whole research ecosystem and then utilise that data to keep making the case that Ottoline's articulated to government to really capture that. And that, I think, would address some of like Angela's point about the way in which social impact and the point that Anne's just raised more fully is because it's captured very well in parts of the sector, but not all of the sector. And that's probably an area that still needs further development as it progresses, as UKRI progresses to think about the integration of a whole research ecosystem.
Brilliant, thanks. And Sophie, do we have some questions from the online audience?
Yes, we do. So the first question is, what role will digital technology and in particular AI play in terms of the future of work, and how will UKRI strategy support that?
Well, that's just a little question.
It's a small topic.
Goodness. So, I mean, obviously AI is transforming everything that we do. Big sense across the world. It's a very exciting and powerful technology. It's a whole set of technologies, actually. And it will have impact pretty much everywhere. And again, one of the things that I'm excited about from the point of view of UKRI's contribution is one of the reasons the UK is in a strong position on AI is because of many, many years of investment in the relevant research communities as the technologies have developed. And we can do it now in an integrated way. So our big new AI programs have responsible AI embedded right from the beginning. And that's the trick for all of this. It's making sure that the extraordinary opportunities from AI are captured in a way that mitigates as far as possible the harms and in a way that delivers those opportunities right across our society. And, it's very different. That's a very, very general answer, but because the number of specific answers are huge. We're having an interesting conversation at the moment about the role of ChatGPT in writing grants, for example. And it can go then right through, of course, to how we can use AI to improve productivity in the health system, as in that triangle diagram I said, but in a way that obviously people are comfortable with and safeguards patient not only safeguards patient safety, but actually increases the quality of care that people are getting. So lots to do and very exciting to have the AI summit coming up where the UK is really taking a lead role in bringing together nations to talk about all of these challenges up front so that globally we also get the maximum benefits from these technologies without or in a way that mitigates as far as possible the risks. Did you want to add anybody?
I mean, I think what's fascinating for me about that question is, as well as a question about how UKRI operates, it's a social science question. It's a question about how will a particular instance of a new technology transform society. And from a social science point of view, I'd say many of those questions are really understudied, and that's something that we, with our research communities, I think are keen to do something about. Case in point, I'm involved in a government panel on trying to understand the implications of AI for the value and usage of government data sets. It's probably one of about 10,000 different problems like that that require solutions that are quite complex. And it's fascinating when we look at the underlying evidence that you would expect to rely on for those kind of questions. Economic questions about valuation, legal questions, and indeed AI technical questions about what the value of particular data sets are. We kind of come up with a paucity of evidence and a paucity of research. Now, on the one hand, that's worrying because we do need to make decisions, and it's nice to be able to make decisions in an evidence-rich environment. On the other hand, as a research funder, that's also kind of exciting because it's good to know that there are important questions that research can help us provide the answer to. So we hope we, working with you and the wider research communities, can take those things forward.
Well, I was going to write into ChatGPT to offer the answer to that question, but I didn't have time to get my phone out. But seriously, I think the really interesting and wonderful opportunity here is for those kind of computer scientists and other people who are kind of developing AI to work together with the kind of the social scientists in understanding kind of how best to adopt that, to work with society in the sense of, you know, what is acceptable, what is responsible, and to work with government in the sense of, you know, where are some of our biggest challenges, etc., which I think means that the likelihood of developing the technology which will have the impact you want from it is much greater than perhaps if we look historically. There are more than one occasion when innovation has run ahead of social acceptance and various things, and then it doesn't deliver ultimately what you want, and that can stall things. So I think it's actually working across the piece where something like this can have the impact that undoubtedly it's likely to have.
Thank you. I need to look to my colleagues at the back of the room to check if we're out of time. I'm conscious of time. We probably do need to, but I think this is the start. A very small amount has been covered here, considering how many good people we have in the room today. But you know, I do know that the team's intention is to make this a shared endeavour. That you've been invited because genuinely UKRI wants to work with all of us on this and continue the conversation was the commitment. So I think we should probably end up with a series of genuine, if you want to do it, some Teams calls or so people don't have to battle the rain. We'll get the people that we want around the table to talk about how this is working and really dig into more detail. So thank you all. Thank you to the panel.
Second panel, we're going forward from that first one where we looked at UKRI as an agile, flexible and an innovative funder. The second panel is looking more at the regional dimension, and over the last 2 days we've had a lot of discussions around that. The panel is drawn from a number of different sectors and have a number of different viewpoints, and I'm delighted to have a chance of introducing them. The fifth panellist is just about to join us, which is fantastic, perfect timing. Do join us, Chloe. The idea, the structure of this panel is that 4 of the panellists are going to do thought pieces, 5-minute thought pieces, and then after that we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And talking to UKRI before this, they were very clear that they don't necessarily want that questions being fired, answers being given, but more of a conversation, more of a discussion about where they're at and where they can play a part in the regional economic development, the regional development of R&I. And I've been very impressed not just over the last 2 days. I took part in a roundtable yesterday, chaired by Stian, looking at this regional dimension, but all of the conversations, all of the strategy that I've heard from UKRI, I've been very impressed with the way that they are developing as a funder and appear, certainly, to be listening to the sector in a very meaningful way. So before we do the thought pieces, I'll just do some brief introductions about the panel. So first off, we've got the Right Honourable Chloe Smith, the MP for Norwich North since 2009. She's previously been the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology between April and July 2023, when Michelle Donnellan was on maternity leave. Her previous ministerial positions include Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work, and Minister of State for Constitution and Devolution. She studied English at York and worked for Deloitte before entering Parliament. And I wasn't sure if that was thunder or a plane taking off. So two clear connections with the area that I cover. So I'm Director of Eastern Arc, which brings together the universities of UEA, Essex and Kent. So very much a regional role. And Chloe has two clear connections with that. The first is that she was born in Ashford in Kent. So a clear Kentish connection. But you heard it here first. She's just about to be awarded an honorary degree from UEA. So congratulations on that, Chloe. The second speaker is Anne Osbourn. Anne is a microbial and plant biologist. Her research focuses on plant, natural products, biosynthesis, function, and mechanisms of metabolic diversification. Her discovery that the genes for many of these pathways are organized in clusters in plant genomes like beads on a string has greatly accelerated the ability to find new pathways and chemistries of potential importance for the development of drugs and other useful compounds. In 2023, she received the Nosenes Prize for her pioneering research. She's also a poet and founder and leads the Science, Art and Writing Initiative, an interdisciplinary science education outreach program. And we were talking earlier about her poetry around Rockall. Maybe we can touch on that at some point. And finally, Professor Andrew Lovett is Professor of Geography at UEA. He joined UEA in 1990 from the University of Lancaster, and his academic background is in human geography. He's got particular interests in issues of rural land use, natural capital and ecosystem services, the kind of things that Guy mentioned in his piece, as well as future energy pathways and catchment management. He has and is currently working on many pan-UKRI programs, specifically across NERC and ESRC. And he has very kindly been involved in podcasts, Eastern Art podcasts around natural capital, which I found fascinating. So with that, I'll hand over to Chloe as the first speaker to give a 5-minute thought piece.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's an absolute pleasure to join you this morning, and I hope that many of you have had a safe journey here, considering the rain and some of the conditions going on in getting here. But I wanted to begin by thanking Ottoline and all of the UKRI team for coming here to Norwich and to Norfolk as part of your grand tour. I think it's excellent that you've done so, and that's not only because you'll have seen already the huge quality that is here to welcome you in Norwich, but also because of the impact beyond Norwich, and I hope that's come out actually loud and clear in your work yesterday and the rest of today. 3 points from me to help situate this panel's discussion. I wanted to touch on the impact of UKRI's work in Norwich and why it matters, and then secondly, a few national considerations, and indeed, thirdly, some international points to accompany that. As you will have heard today, and as many of you will already know, the impact to Norwich, to Norfolk and to the east of England of the allocations via UKRI is significant. And we're talking, as I understand it, about a value across the east of England of over £1 billion. And of course, that reflects in many cases the huge strengths that we will know and value in Norwich, and that indeed are reflected on the panel. For example, example, plant and microbial science. But as the previous discussion also just pointed out, this is about getting to value in people's real lives, is it not? And we can see some of that when we start to pursue the GVA figures. So, for example, I was struck by the BBSRC report just out, I think, last week that talks about £900 million of GVA from 10 years of wheat research. And let's have more of that. 3 cheers for the wheat researchers, because in all seriousness, that is how we begin to translate the work of UKRI into our local economy. And of course, as has already been touched on this morning, it's not just the economy in terms of pounds and pence. We can also see the value, the huge value of much of the medical, clinical, social research that the institutions here do, and indeed the arts and humanities, and I'm so looking forward to a bit of poetry to help us underline that point. We do need, I think, a better way of expressing all of this, though, as previous audience questions really just underlined. We all want to be able to be sure on outcomes and not just inputs. I think the point that was just made a second ago about narratives is essential, actually, and it was something that I had a very powerful discussion with some early career scientists at the NRP just a few months ago, because we were looking at how scientists and politicians need to be able to work together to do each of their 2 halves of a job to be able to get to good public service, which is based on, rooted in science and evidence. Indeed, when I was leading the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, which was a wonderful privilege to do just earlier this year, and in doing so, I laid the annual report of UKRI in Parliament, so it's great to close the loop here today. But when I was doing that role, I was very struck by the fact that I was not going to be the foremost scientist in the room, clearly. I was not there to be the expert in any one of the fields, but what I was there to do was to provide lay leadership. And what I mean by that is democratic accountability, because at the end of all of this is taxpayers' money. So taxpayers, quite rightly, quite constitutionally correctly, want accountability for that, and the best way to get to that is to demonstrate the value that is being delivered. Let me just briefly raise some 2 national considerations to flavour our discussions this morning. The first is about how we leverage private investment in alongside public investment, and I think this is absolutely critical. You see it indeed reflected in the sort of the mission that the government has set itself about doing this around the country, and you see it, I think, particularly strongly here in the discourse that you'll have had with those of us in Norwich and those who are trying to commercialise the excellent research that we see coming out of the NRP and all of the institutions. The other point then is about spreading that investment beyond London, beyond the greater South East. And I say that with a little bit of trepidation in this room, because I'm sure this will already have come out in conversation, but there's quite a nuanced relationship for Norwich with the greater South East. We hugely value what is capable of being done in Oxford, in Cambridge, in London. And on whichever geographical definition you choose to take, we may or may not be part of the South East. But the point is we want to see that value being spread even further. And I'm fairly sure there are communities here in rural Norfolk that would say today that they hadn't seen a bit of it and would like very much to be part of all of that mission. UKRI also, I think, has some challenges of its own, which is fair to highlight here. And many of you may have seen the grant review, which goes into this in some detail. But given the history that UKRI has come through of having been merged from multiple organisations, those challenges are very pertinent, actually, to our quest to be able to get regional clarity and regional value. Because, for example, as Grant pointed out, even the regional data that is capable of being produced is coming from fragmented systems. And so we strongly support UKRI in being able to complete that improvement journey to do all of that job better, both regionally and nationally. The final thing I wanted to mention before I'm sure I'm out of my 5 minutes is just why all this matters in the international race. And I do think there is something of a race going on. Technology was already mentioned in the previous question, and it is clear for all to see that there is a huge role for academia, but also for commercial practitioners in terms of AI, in terms of capturing the benefits of technology, capturing the opportunity, and we hope insuring against the risk. And that is, of course, a very big flavour to a major national and international debate that is going on at present. And I also finally wanted to touch on the work of the Department for Science, Innovation and Tech in trying to position the UK as at the front of that race. And that's not only in technology, that's also in science, in innovation. That is, I think, a mission that we would all share. And in doing so, we will be using so many partnerships across the globe. I was really pleased that we were able to secure the Horizon deal. But of course, let's look beyond the horizons of Horizon, because there are many, many more partnerships available globally that will assist in bringing all this to a reality. I'll pause there and look forward to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chloe. There's a lot to pick up on there. So start to think about some of those questions, those thoughts that you might want to feed back to Chloe or to the panel generally. I see that Andrew's slide is up next. So, Andrew, can I hand over to you?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Andrew Lovett. I'm actually Norwich born. I was born in Norwich, grew up in the city, went to university and worked elsewhere for a while. Been back in Norwich since 1990. I'm a geographer by background. I specialise in the use of geographical information systems, essentially computers working with all sorts of spatial data and maps, hence the kinds of things that you can see on the slide. And I'm particularly interested in how they can be used to address all sorts of different types of sustainability challenges. So what you can see on the slide is a sort of sample of projects that I've worked on in the past 10 years. I've worked with farmers, I've worked with local authorities, I've worked with all sorts of environmental NGOs, the new Anglia, LEP, and energy and water businesses. So we worked with farmers in the Wensum Test Catchment Project to look at how we could improve both business efficiency and environmental quality. I worked a lot on things to do with natural capital, so we created an online natural capital evidence compendium for Norfolk and Suffolk, and I'm now working on the local nature recovery strategy for the region. And I've got an interest in how we can use spatial data to improve the use of renewable energy, and I've been working with local authorities, UK power networks, the Greater South East Energy Hub and so forth to do those kinds of things. It's, I think, important to say that I've done a lot of these projects. Very few of them have actually been directly funded by UKRI or the constituent research councils. But a lot of them have benefited from the sorts of expertise that's been gained in those kinds of projects as well. I've tried to flag some examples of that on the slide. So I would say there's a very important synergy between the two. In my experience, regional partners really value the knowledge and skills that academics can bring, but the independence is often important as well, especially where there are different organisations and challenges and debates about the best ways of doing things. I found that particularly working with farmers and landowners, building trust is very important, and that takes a bit of time. But to do these sorts of projects, you've also sometimes got to be able to respond quite flexibly and quickly. I've been very fortunate to have two researchers work with me at UEA for over 20 years. They've had multiple short-term contracts. We would not be able to do the projects that we've done if we didn't have that kind of research capacity. So making sure that kind of thing is in place is, in my opinion, really important in terms of building these sorts of regional collaborations and the benefits that can come from them. And then to finish with, I'd like to sort of raise the issue, well, is this worthwhile? Because personally, I've had comments both from Research Council reviewers and indeed colleagues at UEA that it's too parochial. You should be concentrating on the big global challenges rather than, for instance, what's going on in farms in Aylsham or something like that. But I think you can do things at the local level that give us really important insights nationally and internationally. UEA has the motto, do different. And we've recently launched a new civic charter, sort of marking our commitment to the region. And as a Norwich-born person, personally, I found it really satisfying to be able to make a difference in a place that I'm really proud to call home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Very inspiring. There's a few things where I was making notes. The building of trust is clearly something which is crucial to all of our work on a regional basis. Responding flexibly and quickly, once again, very important in building up research capacity. And the fact that acting locally doesn't mean parochial. There's a lot of relevance to what we do in the region that will have impacts nationally and internationally. So thank you for that. Over to our next speaker, Anne.
Okay, thanks very much. So now for something a little bit different. My lab works, I'm at the John Innes Centre, and my lab works on trying to understand how plants make chemicals, particularly the chemicals that are important as drugs and as new drug leads. Plants are a treasure trove of chemistry, but we don't understand for the most part how they do this. So first I wanted to just show you an example, because I think it helps to give a feel for how the research system works in this regard. And so what you can see on this slide and also on the side is a timeline for a case study where we became interested in a particular tree, which you can see on the top right, which grows in a certain part of Chile. And the reason that this tree is so important is because it makes a particular chemical, which you can sort of see down at the bottom right. It doesn't matter what that chemical is. Let's just say it's structurally very challenging and complicated. And the only way to access this chemical is by extracting it from the bark of the tree, which only grows in a certain part of Chile. So why is this important? It's important because, for random reasons I don't need to go into, that chemical was found to play a critical role in stimulating the immune system when we receive vaccines. And so it was approved for use in vaccines, human vaccines, in 2017. And it's now in vaccines for shingles, malaria, COVID, respiratory virus, 20 other vaccines in development. This has meant there's been a run on the tree because there's no other way of getting the compound. And indeed, I heard that during the COVID crisis, the US Army were actually guarding those trees in Chile. So it's a highly valuable molecule, and the demand for it is continuing to increase. It happens to be the sort of molecule that through 20-odd years of research in my lab, we'd gained experience of working on through a lot of funding from UKRI, particularly from BBSRC, also from EPSRC, from US funding agencies, the NIH, for example, and from the European Union. And so we'd sort of warmed ourselves up to take on the challenge of tackling the problem of how to understanding how the tree makes the chemical. And we started this process in 2017 with £20,000 from a flexible fund at John Innes to promote innovation. And this enabled us to do some preliminary work with the tree, to do some sequencing, which we did with the Earlham Institute, also in Norwich. And then in 2018, I won a translational award from BBSRC, a 2-year fund, 1.6 million, to progress this project, which we then did. And then we sequenced the genome of the tree so that we could start to understand the instruction manual that would tell us how the chemistry was being done. During the process of this project, which I wasn't talking about publicly, I was approached at a BBSRC-funded network in industrial biotechnology and bioenergy by somebody from a big pharma company who said, "We think you might be able to help us." And eventually, with a lot of work from our tech transfer company and our business development people, we got a grant in place, an award from Big Pharma of over £2 million of direct funding into my lab to continue this work of understanding how the tree does the chemistry. Ultimately, we've now finished all of that work. We understand the whole of the chemical process. And this now opens up the opportunity to make this molecule and also variants of it, which are actually better as immunostimulants. They're less toxic and they're better at immunostimulation, using the instruction manual from the tree. So I'm showing you this as an example because it started with a huge body of fundamental research, and it's now gone through to a position where we understand the whole pathway. We have patents filed on it. There's an arrangement with Big Pharma who have an option on it. So my lab does work on not just this tree, but it's agnostic. It wants to understand, it's very ambitious, how the plant kingdom does its chemistry. So if we have multiple sequences, and the Earlham Institute, amongst other places, is an outstanding place for generating plant genome sequences, we can start to decode the whole of the instruction manual, and we can put it to work to make chemicals. Plants have been known as a source of drugs and therapeutics for thousands of years, and so we can start to think really big about using the big data that's emerging from plant genomics. We have a very rapid and powerful transient expression system, which I won't go into now, which enables us to take the information from those genomes and put them to work and turn them into chemistry. And we're using AI, machine learning-based approaches to help us to filter the information from all these plant genome sequences. But importantly also, to work out what are the chemical features of a good drug. How can we use machine learning to design drugs? There are companies out there that do this, but importantly, they're not able to then make them, because the vast majority of these molecules cannot be made with a chemical kit in a laboratory. We have to use learnings from nature. So if it's possible to animate the slide and press the button, so you won't be able to see this at all, but down the bottom, a couple of outcomes from this are that based on the work that we've been doing, we've now secured seed funding for a company, 2.7 million, and we have heads of terms in place. We have a consortium of 4 investors. So we're very excited about getting that off the ground on the Norwich Research Park, hopefully by the end of the year, maybe early next year. So that's very exciting. I've also managed to get £4.5 million from Wellcome, a discovery award, and that's for 8 years. So that's big money for academic research. And I think UKRI is fantastic at funding our research. It's been invaluable. But having the space and the freedom to really take on big challenges with large amounts of funding for more than 2 or 3 years is a huge thing. And we also have another BBSRC Translational Award to take the learnings from the tree to make designer vaccine adjuvants, immunostimulants. So the challenges we've faced, it's been a whole experience thus far, and we're only at the beginning of working out how to go down the commercialisation route. We've been talking to investors for years, and those discussions have been very useful, often in realising we don't have our pitch right, or we do need to answer certain questions. There's also a very conservative attitude in general in Big Pharma. They want to be able to synthesise chemicals using chemistry. They're wary of natural products. They're wary of doing things different. They're certainly wary of moving from their comfort zone of making things in microbes by fermentation to, in our case, making things through expression in a very powerful plant system. But hopefully, Hothouse Therapeutics, the name of the company, as it grows and expands, will overcome those hurdles. It's a platform company. Our initial investors are generalists. They're not pharma specialists. But if we can get our first therapeutic through into the pipeline, then we hope we'll attract more specialist investors. And as the company grows and expands, we anticipate that it will be feeding projects into other structures in the region, including the Earlham Institute and its foundry. You could say what we're doing is engineering biology, which is a very hot area at the moment, and working with leaf expression systems, also on the Norwich Research Park, who are a CRO doing transient plant expression, another enabler. And we have big, big visions. You know, we don't want to just sell out after 2 years. We want to be bigger than Ginkgo Bioworks. So, you know, we're thinking big. Probably be crying in 2 years, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think the point's made, and that's a great case study of how we need to think long-term, and we often need a variety of funders feeding into that development from fundamental research through to innovation and application. Two very key points that are worth thinking about in our discussions that are going to follow this. The final speaker who's going to give her thought piece is Roz. So over to you, Roz.
There should be a slide, if that can be. Okay, so how research and innovation is a driver for regional and local growth, from my perspective, is about Norwich Research Park, obviously, as the science park manager there. And we want to be a force for good and economic prosperity in Norfolk and the UK. For global investors, we are an hour's flight from Schiphol. To those that live in the rural and coastal areas of Norfolk, we're the city in the centre. If you are a plant scientist anywhere in the world, this will be on the bucket list of places that you'll want to work in your career. And if you're growing a company like Colorifics and Tropic, some of these amazing companies that we've got on site, then it's a good place for them to help attract and retain the best people because of the quality of life and the housing. So UKRI's ambition is to make research and innovation more accessible, more porous, encouraging people to flow from academia into business and back again. And we want to help to try and do this in any way we can at Norwich Research Park. So our campus is one of the largest research clusters in Europe. We've got the University of East Anglia, Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital, 4 research institutes. There's a shared vision for growth of the campus. There's over 30 companies there. We've got 1.6 million square feet of planning consent. It is a growing cluster. It's part of an ecosystem. It's contributing to the local economy. It's championing equality. We're reaching out to schools. We're creating new jobs in science and innovation and construction, management, marketing, events, catering, finance, accountancy, legal, IP management, and it's all about people. Me, you, all of us can play our part, benefit now in our careers, but also lay the foundations for future generations. And what's really key is that us being a place means that it's not theoretical, it's not just an idea, it's an inspiring location that's able to harness the power of research and innovation, delivering a campus-wide enterprise strategy, creating a sense of community, being a catalyst for multidisciplinary teams, hosting industry events, creating spin-outs, creating desire for the location, attracting long-term patient capital, attracting venture capital funding, inspiring young people about this place as the future of the workforce. So with the help and support of UKRI, to change the way that we work, to create the systems where people can move freely between academia and business, we can definitely do more. But knowing what to do and how to do it really well means that we can help others in the UK to do the same. Maximise the potential of research and innovation and benefits to society and the economy in the whole of the UK. UKRI could use Norwich Research Park as a pilot, as a test bed, to look at how to maximise research and innovation through the campus-wide initiatives that we've got, and we can help apply those to other areas with science parks and research and innovation campuses across the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz. That was a great way to end an inspiring list of thought pieces, thinking about issues of place not being a theoretical thing. In this virtual world, it's very easy to forget the importance of place and the fact that place is a serious entity and has to be taken into account in terms of bringing people together, the connectivity that you talked about. In terms of what Norwich can offer. That's very useful. So we've got about 20, 25 minutes for questions, for discussions, for thoughts, for comments. I've got some to kick off, but I'd very much like to hear from the audience about their thoughts on anything they've heard about from the thought pieces, any considerations that those thought pieces have triggered in their own mind. And leading on perhaps from our first panel as well, the role of UKRI in developing that regional research and innovation capacity and the economic development side of things. I see a hand straight away, so the lady over there.
Thank you so much for an absolutely fantastic overview of thoughts pieces and getting our brains going. It's Beatrix Schlaub-Ridley from the British Antarctic Survey. I was very interested in hearing the plans for expansion that the research park in the area here has as well, and making a link to what Ottoline mentioned earlier in terms of UKRI's strong focus on thought and practical leadership in global issues such as achieving net zero. I wonder, how is this going to be showcased here, in that we want growth, we want expansion, we have to do it in a way that is fully sustainable, be it net zero, be it biodiversity. So how is that going to be achieved by the regional leadership, and how is UKRI going to be supporting this and using the leverage that it has to ensure that when we grow, we do so taking full account of all the data that, as researchers, we are bringing forward to showcase the urgency of the biodiversity and the climate crises, and how are we going to be leaders in this area?
Thanks very much. Roz, do you want to go first on that?
Happy. So there's 1.6 million square feet of planning consent, so we can build out lots of new buildings that are going to be the facilities that these high growth companies that we're hoping are going to stay will want to take. And what we need to do at Norwich Research Park is maximise the potential of all of the research expertise, the technology platforms, the people, and do that by having co-location of businesses and the researchers to work with each other and collaborate. So that's the vision for the park, is indeed to attract more people, to create jobs, to help companies to grow and help them to access all of the UKRI funded research. But we need to do that in a sustainable way. And you need to look at all of the different actions that you can take to limit impact on climate change, which can be to do with renewable energy. It can be to do with the way that buildings are built and the different targets that we look at, like BREEAM, and there are other tests as well. Looking at biodiversity, master planning the place so that it is a pleasant place for everybody, but it takes care of, you know, the types of plants and animals that need to exist, and it adds to everybody's experience of a place if all of those things are looked at and are as important. And I think you're talking about green, net zero environment, but ESG is also social and governance. And I think it's so important to talk about the fact that we need to be on the right side of social justice issues and champion equality and be a beacon for equality as well. And also on the social side, I'm so passionate about making sure that if we can't get it right, at least we're helping young people to step in where we leave and for them to get it right. So you know, being accessible, being welcoming, being inclusive, and looking at our carbon footprint, how people travel to work, what buildings we build, and being mindful of the environment and creating a beautiful environment that adds to that area. That's why I love the job, because it's all of those things every day.
Thanks, Roz. Ottoline, do you want to add to that from a national perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously this is a huge issue for the whole country and indeed the world. We need to re-engineer our economy to a fully circular, sustainable, net zero economy. It's huge. And every single one of us needs to do our bit at every single scale. And so, of course, from UKRI's point of view, we have, as you know, an ambition for our estate to be net zero by 2040, and we have embedded in our infrastructure programme, so for example, the NP3 programme that we're supporting here, very exacting environmental standards. But we also know that it's not easy. In your position at BAS, huge amount of incredibly high quality environmental research going on, but it itself has quite a substantial carbon footprint. Everybody knows about the very wonderful Sir David Attenborough research vessel. It's a really critical asset for us in our environmental research, but it burns diesel. And so everything we do, we need to be asking that question always. And indeed, across UKRI, it's embedded on every single one of our papers. There are a couple of questions we always ask about everything, and that is one of them. Are we a shining example? We've got a long way to go still to have that as a early kind of knee-jerk reaction to everything that we do in all kinds of areas. It's of course building and so on, but we were talking about AI earlier. Compute is going to be one of the biggest issues in terms of net zero and environmental sustainability, and we need always to be embedding best practice now, but also thinking about the longer term solutions for re-engineering the way compute works to be a fundamentally lower energy activity. So really great that you raised that. It's huge, and really keen that the community continues to push us to do a better job every day.
Thanks very much. Chloe, did you want to say anything from a government perspective on this?
Just extremely brief, really just to acknowledge that there's a set of legislative questions actually that sit behind a framework that would help achieve the goal in your question. I won't lay that out here. There's much depth in that. But if I may really endorse what Roz says about the NRP and do a little shout out. I think I see Minnie Moll of the Design Council here in the middle. Sophie, if you and Minnie haven't spoken yet, Minnie just chaired a conference earlier this week at the UEA with the Design Council entitled Design for Planet. And I suspect she will have discovered quite a few answers that go right to the heart of your query.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, David.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm David Maguire, the Vice-Chancellor at the University of East Anglia. I think if there's one common thread that's run through this event, it's that research and innovation is essentially a people business, with the ideas, discoveries, inventions, our currency. And having spent half of my career, more than 20 years, running research and development in the private sector, I'm struck by the importance and significance of continuity of funding to do world-leading research and development, but also about the importance of teams and groups to solve substantive real-world problems. And I can pick up the two case studies today from Anne and Andrew. That was definitely a theme there, the idea that people are important and consistency of funding. However, the incentives for our system, and we talked a bit about this last night, didn't we, Ottoline, is very much on the individual, the star PI, and the rewards which arise from that. So I think if we're going to make progress in bringing those two things together, we need to think about the right incentives to deliver the right sorts of outcomes. And I wonder what the panel might have to say about how we move in a way that we would wish.
Thank you, David. So incentives for developing the next generation. Anne, do you want to say a little bit?
Yeah, I think in the case of the example that I showed, I got a 2-year translational grant to recruit 4 postdocs, and I wanted to recruit the best. So they came from all over the world. So you have the visa issues, the time delays, I got an extension. It was a very ambitious project. So they were installed, fired up. But of course, when you have early career researchers on a 2-year contract, they're then looking for their next contract. But luckily, I had this chance encounter with Big Pharma, who said, we want this project to finish, so we'll fund it. And that meant that it wasn't easy because I had to, they weren't going to just give us the money. They gave us some money. We had to meet milestones. The early career researchers were never sure whether they would get extended or not. But in the end, we did it. And for me, that's been a huge learning experience to see what you can do. You know, this is a molecular biologist, a chemist, a computational person, complementary skill sets. And they were working as a team, and also they were reporting to industry on a monthly basis. It was a real training process for them. And I know that people in John Innes have said to me, that's amazing that you managed to do that. It wasn't me, it was the team. But keeping the team together was critical. So if I hadn't have had the 2.5 million, well, it's 2.5 totally, but 2 million for that project through a chance encounter, and a huge amount of support from our tech transfer people. Because, as I'm sure you know, when you're dealing with big pharma or industry, half the people in the room, the legal people, they're not scientists.
Thanks very much. Ottoline, I know that people, one of the 6 objectives for UKRI, thinking about how you change that culture and the incentives necessary to change that culture. Can you speak a bit about that?
Absolutely. This is one of my main things in life, literally. It's something I've been thinking about for a very long time, because over that period of time, the incentives, in my view, have become more and more entrenched in the wrong direction. And again, one of the extraordinary opportunities from the creation of UKRI is we have a sufficient range of levers in one place to be able to pull them synchronously in a way that I hope will move things on. So I mentioned, for example, this shift in the way we think about CVs to be deeply evidenced but more narrative and welcoming of a much wider range of evidence types to demonstrate the way people are contributing. I absolutely agree that the way assessment needs to work needs to think more broadly in the context of teams, and indeed that the BBSRC, for example, have used that narrative CV in their Institute Strategic Programme Grant Renewal with teams, not individuals, represented on that CV. So there are a whole variety of different things that we're doing to shift the landscape. What Anne highlights, which is the way funding systems work in bits, is a particularly interesting phenomenon, because on the one hand, if you have an awful lot of longer, larger projects, you essentially lock out new projects. So you are absolutely having to balance, in the way that I described, between the full range of types of funding that we need, so that there is longer, larger funding, but not in a way that the opportunity costs undermine anybody new coming into the system. And what we would hope for some of these things is that the institutes that we're funding, particularly in universities, I don't know if people saw, but 1/4 of the UKRI budget, that, 25%, £2 billion a year, goes straight into English universities as QR funding following the ref. That is a very large sum of money, and it is completely unhypothecated and flexible. And so an interesting question is how we move the business models for universities into a greater level of financial sustainability, so that they're better able to make use of that incredibly flexible funding to support the longer-term employment of a wider variety of people across that research system. And then in the context of institutes, there isn't QR funding, but nonetheless, the model for most institutes does involve a block of funding. And again, we need to think about how we ensure that there is enough agility and flexibility for institutes also to be the providers of some longer-term stability across those landscapes. So it's another one of those things that we all need to work together to do, to shift the culture and to shift how we think about the funding opportunities that we have, and marry all of those things together to create the full range of activities that we need, which in some cases will include long-term stability, and in other cases absolutely explicitly needs rapid disruption. And keeping both of those things together is quite a challenge, but it's certainly something I think we can manage as an innovation community, because that's our lifeblood, really.
Thanks, Ottoline. Rapid disruption. I love that phrase. That's great. More questions? Yes, over there.
Yeah, I'm Sarah from the Science and Technology Facilities Council, which is part of UKRI. I'm also from Norwich. I was born here and grew up here. And I'd like to go back to the theme of people, which I think is a really key challenge for Norfolk. A lot of young people feel, whether it's correct or incorrect, that they need to move away from Norfolk for higher education and subsequently for jobs. And if we're not managing to kind of retain those skills and then attract people back once they've graduated, you know, we're never going to be able to develop the research, you know, that we could have in Norfolk. Norfolk is a lovely place. A lot of people want to come back, but yeah, how can we change that perception among young people? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think I should turn to someone who has been in Norwich and the area for quite a while. So, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a challenge. There has been an expectation in the past that when you go to university, you do leave home. I would say that's changing. I know from talking to our students at UEA, we have many more now who are studying from the local area, from Norwich, from surrounding towns and commuting in. I think that's one thing. I think we have a lot of initiatives at the institution on widening participation to get people to think about university who perhaps haven't done so before. And we're trying to put much more in the place in terms of support for people, in terms of opportunities to go to taster days, some elements of financial support, support for the transition between college and university, all of these sorts of things. Equally, we're trying very hard to ensure that when the students are here and they enjoy their experience, we try and make sure that there's, you know, opportunities with employers in the local area for them to stay in Norwich. I think if we can get people here, we can keep them.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Chloe.
May I add to that? It's a great question, and although outrageously I was born in Ashford, I grew up in Norfolk since 3. I went through the entire comprehensive school system here, so I'm going to put myself on that side of this debate. But I think as we've just added to that, I think there's sort of two things going on which are almost in tension. And they both come under the heading of what does social mobility consist of? Does it consist of getting a great education, having your horizons expanded, and as part of that, moving away or experiencing other parts of the country or indeed the world? Or does it consist of having excellent opportunities right here on your doorstep? And I think we want both to be true, don't we? We know in Norfolk that we still, and this has been a long-standing issue, have a job of work to do to bring our education system, I think, up, our school-based education system, up to some of the standards that you see elsewhere in the country. And I'm unafraid to say that. I think that is true. And I think colleagues from all parts of the broader educational system here will probably acknowledge that that's still to be a problem for us. That said, then at the higher education and also further education section of our system, we have huge opportunities, really globally competitive opportunities going on here in Norwich and in Norfolk and indeed in the eastern region. So we've got to crack at both of these aspects. I don't want those two things to be in tension, but it continues to be a challenge that we're working on in every part of what we do here in Norfolk. I think the value of today's conference is in helping us address those questions. The more we do to tell that story and make the sales job, actually, of how excellent we are in Norwich in so many ways, the more we can then unite to work on other parts of the system that feed that with the young people of our county in mind at all times. And I don't know if it's been mentioned earlier this morning, forgive me, I wasn't in the room, but, you know, credit to the venue that we are in this morning that is also part of that. NCF and the Community Foundation here operating the Nest also have a major contribution to make to that, as do a few other players who I think are listening in this morning.
Thanks, Chloe. In the round table yesterday, we did talk quite a bit about skills and the the skills that have been outlined here and the need to ensure that we do train people within the area and give them the opportunity. And I mentioned the work that the University of Essex is doing in terms of the funding they've got from the Levelling Up Fund for a Centre for Coastal Communities in Clacton, and overcoming that idea that universities are out there rather than within the regions, such as Clacton. Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to say a little bit about the Centre for Coastal Communities?
Hello. Is that working? Yeah. So Rob's saying University of Essex. Yeah, so we're forming a new Centre for Coastal Communities, and that links to our Institute for Public Health and Wellbeing. And we're working really closely with Tendring District Council to set this up. So it's very much at the early stages at the moment. And the primary purpose of it is to look at resolving some of the social, but particularly health inequalities that exist in the coastal communities around Essex. So we're bringing together, we're drawing on research across the institution, but also bringing together a team focused on this to do this. But it's very much a partnership approach and a co-creation approach with both the local authorities, but also the local health services to put this together. But that is the focus of the Centre for Coastal Communities. But there is a kind of added benefit for basing it in Clacton, we hope. So this is in progress at the moment, and that's to raise the visibility of the university in that area. So although it's only a few miles away, it's probably fair to say that the association between, say, teenagers and the university isn't as strong as it could be. So actually, by having a presence within those coastal communities, we're hoping to kind of raise the visibility, but also kind of lift aspirations a bit. We've been quite successful across Essex, actually. So a lot of our students are from households with average incomes below £30,000. A lot of them are the first people in their families to go to university. So we're hoping to extend that good work through this. And while I've got the microphone, can I ask a question?
Cheeky. Okay, go on.
But I think, can I use this to illustrate, actually, that it shows the complexity of some of our local communities. And I just wanted to kind of draw on, we've heard about some of the great schemes that are coming out of UKRI, some of the really interesting place-based schemes. And then if you kind of look historically, if you think about kind of economic growth funding, some regional funding to address social challenges, a lot of it was more on a local level through LEPs or regional development agencies in the past. And perhaps there it might have been easier to achieve the join up with local strategy and what can be quite a complex picture on the ground of areas of relative affluence and deprivation, sometimes being, particularly in the east of England, I'd say, being very close together. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure, it's quite an open question, but whether there's a view on how that you can achieve that with centralised funding and kind of understand that complexity. And maybe almost open an offer. Is there a role for universities in helping support funders and UKRI in understanding these pictures as very connected entities?
Thanks, Rob. A great question. And I did want to, leading on from that, touch perhaps on devolution at some point. Chloe, can I come to you on that?
You can, but you might need to help me by clarifying your devolution question then. Or do you want to go to UKRI first for the main answer?
No, it was following on from that question about how local government and central government can work with local authorities and local universities.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, forgive me for a slow start. I was still thinking about the education statistics as I was hearing that question. I think there is, again, great opportunity in this. And as you will know, the framework for doing so is continuing to develop. Indeed, right around now, Norfolk is haggling over the details, essentially, of a devolution deal, which will include elements of skills I think does not go as far as the, if you like, sort of more specialist end of research and innovation, but others can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I think there's a huge role to play for those different sections of government to work together. It's something that I think has always been quite strong in Norfolk, and again, it goes right back to this point about sense of place. It will be really observable, I hope, that actually we care passionately about working together and seeking to promote that sense of place here in Norfolk. So I would really characterise this as there being all to play for, actually, right now, to bring local government, several different levels, county government, together with national government, together with then institutions such as, and agencies such as UKRI, and crucially such as the education and research institutes themselves that are here in this room, together to perform this job. Now, what's the glue in the system that will do all of that? There's actually, there's probably a dozen people in this room who could, and I think should, step up to do so, and I think the way is absolutely open.
Thank you very much, Ottoline.
Thank you. I'm going to warn Stian, that I'm going to call him any minute now to talk about the work that ESRC are doing to understand what works well in building local partnerships, which of course, and the answer to that question will quite likely be different in different places. So UKRI has always two roles: one to do the investing in the research and innovation that will support local economic growth, but the other is to do the research to understand how you can do that really well. And of course, we're doing both of those things together in an iterative loop. Always, as we've heard, actually, in the context of Anne's work, for example, support will be a patchwork of different funding elements. And it will need to be a patchwork precisely because, as I described at the beginning, our pounds do many different things. So we will have schemes that are specifically aimed at levelling up, Innovate UK launch pads, the innovation accelerators, the Strength in Places Fund, very critically about building local partnerships and delivering what local places need. But also, we have programs on, building a green future, tackling infection, whatever it may be, some major impact that we will want to be investing in. And that will, of course, involve investing in projects around the country. And we need to do both of those things. We need to have both of those different types of funding mechanism. And so a huge amount of what needs to happen is a way for local places, as Chloe said, to understand the kind of card deck of opportunities in a way that allows them to build the winning hand for that area. And some parts of the country have done that brilliantly. I think the South Wales semiconductor work, for example, is a really good example. And how we can surface those examples in a way that other parts of the country can then benefit from that knowledge of how to do it, I think is great. But that how to do it is also a critical part of the ESRC's portfolio. So
I'm getting urgent requests to wind up from Chris, but Stian, if you could just comment on that.
I'll be super quick. It's becoming my catchphrase, but a lot of these things, and this is no exception, are social science questions. And this idea of how do we make sure that research and innovation delivers the benefits for local communities, something that ESRC is investing a lot in at the moment, and I hope will invest more in the future. One particular project, which is relevant because we've been talking about it at UEA yesterday, is our local policy innovation partnerships. We have one, the Partnership for East Coast Communities, focusing very much on many of the issues that face the coastal communities in Norfolk and the local area. And I think what we're trying to do there is to work to see how the benefits from the kind of work that goes on in the innovation economy can affect the wider economy and people's lives. It's super important, and if we can understand better how to do it, then we can make sure that the money that we're investing through UKRI, the work that you're all doing, continues to have benefits kind of across the country.
That's great, Stian. Thank you very much, and put very succinctly so I appreciate that. And it feels like we've only just started to scratch the surface in some of these discussions. We've talked about the importance of skills. We've talked about the importance of regions retaining their skills and their knowledge, and the regions catalysing research which is important not just locally, not just nationally, but globally. And Norwich and the wider east of England can be very proud of what it's doing in this area. We've talked about the importance of long-term funding and flexible and agile funding. And I believe that UKRI is making the right moves in this direction. And I'd like to thank them for coming out and talking to us and being so open to us in our discussions. We are going to, even though this formal part of the day is coming to a close, we've got a networking lunch now, so please do collar any of our panellists, but also the other people in the room, and talk about some of the questions which have been raised in our panel. Another thing that Chris at UKRI has asked me to mention is that we're asking for feedback. How do you want the feedback, Chris? Oh, cards on everyone's table. So fill in those cards. And where do we put them? A box at the back. There you go. So can I just, can you join me in thanking the panel for their comments?